Welcome to the Bible Storyteller channel. Have you ever imagined what life was like in the magnificent Temple of Solomon? A place of unmatched grandeur, mystery, and divine wisdom. But what if I told you that behind the temple's majestic walls, a hidden world of intrigue, luxury, and unspoken power lay in wait? Solomon, known as the wisest king in history, managed not only to rule a vast kingdom, but to juggle the affections and demands of 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. Can you even begin to fathom how a man could divide his time and heart among 1,000 women? Each day, the women in his palace underwent elaborate preparations for their potential night with the king. They bathed in waters infused with rare fragrances, their skin massaged with precious oils like myrrh and aloe. Their hair was braided with strands of pure gold, and their bodies adorned with jewels designed to captivate and enchant. The air itself seemed to carry the weight of mysticism, filled with the scent of exotic perfumes, while sacred rituals and mesmerizing dances unfolded each night. But this wasn't just about indulgence and beauty. It was a fierce, unspoken competition, a battle for Solomon's favor, where women vied for more than just his attention. This vast harem operated under an almost supernatural energy. But what if there's more to the story than mere luxury and politics? What if Solomon's reign was entwined with something darker, something beyond earthly understanding? You're about to uncover secrets that have remained hidden for centuries, and at the heart of it all lies a shocking revelation, something Solomon kept under his control with the power of a legendary ring. What was the true cost of such unmatched power and wisdom? Stay with me until the end, because this story will transform everything you thought you knew about the greatest king in history. If you're ready to dive into the mysteries of Solomon's temple and uncover secrets that have been hidden for thousands of years, drop a 777 in the comments below. Let's unravel this story together. What life was like in Solomon's temple, how Solomon managed 1,000 wives. Imagine yourself in the year 957 BC. The sun rising over the city of Jerusalem paints a scene beyond belief. There, towering over Mount Moriah, stands a structure like no other, a marvel of both architectural wonder and divine significance. Solomon's temple was not simply a building, it was the very embodiment of faith, strength, and the glory of a kingdom, crafted with resources that, by today's standards, would be worth billions of dollars. Its radiant golden walls shimmered as the first light of the day hit, casting a celestial glow upon the land. This was not just a place of worship, it was a monument that declared the unrivaled power and divine favor of Solomon. For 7 continuous years, more than 180,000 laborers worked tirelessly to bring this grand vision to life. From faraway lands, massive caravans transported Lebanon's finest cedarwood, an offering of the highest quality from the ancient world. Skilled Phoenician artisans, renowned for their unparalleled craftsmanship, carved every intricate detail of the temple with precision so exact it could almost be described as divine. The rhythmic sound of hammers and chisels resonated day and night as massive stone blocks were carefully shaped into pieces of art, showcasing engineering skills that still baffle modern minds. The temple's size was imposing, 98 feet long, 33 feet wide, and 49 feet high in the main sanctuary, but it was the interior that left visitors speechless. Every surface gleamed with pure gold, as though the very walls were soaked in the light of heaven itself. The overwhelming gleam of the sacred metal ensured that no eye could rest, consumed by the constant shine. At the heart of the Holy of Holies stood colossal cherubim, carved from olive wood and covered in gold, their wings stretched wide in solemn protection. The air within this chamber was thick with reverence, an atmosphere so charged with holiness that it whispered of divine presence. The priest's courtyard, a place of sacred activity, was paved with precious stones, each one holding its own story and journey from distant lands. At the temple's entrance, two towering pillars, Jachin and Boaz, stood proudly, their massive forms representing strength and stability. Adorned with bronze pomegranates and intricate chains, they symbolized the eternal strength of Solomon's reign. But perhaps the most awe-inspiring element of the temple lay within its sacred heart, the Holy of Holies. This chamber, a perfect cube measuring 10 meters on each side, housed the Ark of the Covenant. Only the high priest was allowed to enter this hallowed space, and only once a year on the Day of Atonement, making it the holiest of all places. The room was filled with the scent of incense, mingling with the fresh aroma of cedar, creating an unforgettable sensory experience for anyone allowed near this divine sanctuary. To ensure that this sacred place would function without ceasing, Solomon instituted a remarkable system, a rotating cycle of 24 priestly divisions, each taking turns to maintain the temple's sacred duties. From replenishing the showbread each Sabbath to keeping the golden lamps burning day and night, the temple's needs were met with precision and devotion. But this was only the beginning of Solomon's reign as a spiritual leader. As we journey deeper into Solomon's world, you'll soon discover the secret forces he wielded, forces that went beyond mere wisdom. The king, known for his supernatural insight, summoned powers to keep dark demonic entities at bay. But that wasn't the only secret he kept behind closed doors. The palace itself harbored rituals that were known only to his 1,000 wives, rituals that veiled the true depth of Solomon's spiritual reach. Beyond that, hidden practices flourished far from the public eye, in the very heart of his kingdom. How did Solomon, the wisest king in history, manage to control the supernatural? And what was the cost of wielding such power? Stay with us as we uncover the mysterious and mystical layers of Solomon's reign, where the divine and the occult intertwined, shaping an empire that still echoes through history. At the first light of dawn, even before the sun's rays could kiss the golden walls of Solomon's temple, a symphony of sound filled the air, each note charged with divine purpose. The thunderous clanging of the bronze gates echoed through the sacred halls, marking the beginning of another day in the temple's sacred service. The Levites, divided into groups with specific tasks, moved with an almost military precision, their devotion and discipline evident in every step. The first act of the day was ritual cleansing, a sacred tradition as vital as the sacrifices themselves. Picture hundreds of servants moving with perfect harmony. Some carried golden jars, each filled with water drawn from the sacred springs, while others swept the courtyards with consecrated brooms, ensuring every corner of the temple was prepared for the holy rituals ahead. The marble floors were so meticulously polished that it was said you could gaze into them and see not just your reflection, but the reflection of your very soul, the purity of the space beneath your feet, mirroring the purity of your spirit. As the temple's sacred preparation continued, the temple musicians, trained Levites who had devoted their lives to the art, began to take their positions in the courtyards. Their harps, cymbals, and trumpets began to play, sending celestial melodies into the morning air. These were no ordinary tunes. Each song had been selected according to instructions given by King David himself. Each melody was assigned to specific moments throughout the day, evoking a spiritual atmosphere that could be felt beyond the walls of Jerusalem, reaching even the heavens themselves. Meanwhile, in the outer courts, merchants offered animals for sacrifice. But this was no ordinary marketplace. Each animal was carefully inspected by the priests to ensure that only those without blemish would be deemed worthy to be offered to God. Prices were set with careful thought, so that even the poorest among the people could participate in the sacred rituals. It was not just a marketplace, it was a place where the divine and the mundane met, where everyone, regardless of their wealth, could draw closer to God. A marvel of ancient engineering was quietly at work behind the scenes, a complex aqueduct system that ensured a constant flow of water to the temple. Water was not just for cleaning, it was essential for purification rituals, a symbol of spiritual renewal. One of the most awe-inspiring features was the immense bronze sea, supported by 12 massive bronze oxen. This reservoir of water was a sacred tool for the priests, holding the water needed for purification and various other daily rituals that ensured the temple remained a place of holiness. Before any sacred service could commence, the priests themselves underwent a meticulous purification process. They donned fine linen garments, stored in chambers dedicated solely to this sacred purpose. Each article of clothing was not just a garment, it was a symbol of divine meaning, its placement in the correct order, carrying with it a deep spiritual significance. The priests' preparations were not merely physical. Each garment was an integral part of their spiritual alignment, a way to sanctify both their body and spirit in preparation for the divine service they were about to undertake. Behind the grand structure of the temple, the bustling activity of a city in itself unfolded. Bakers, specially chosen for their skill and devotion, prepared the showbread in sacred ovens, following an ancient recipe passed down through the generations. The bread, considered a sacred offering, had to be made with the utmost reverence and care. Meanwhile, perfumers, equally devoted, blended the holy incense. The formula for this incense was a closely guarded secret, as closely protected as the temple's own treasures, and it would fill the air with a fragrance so divine it would be said to carry the prayers of the people to God. Each aspect of the temple, from the sacred music to the intricate rituals, was a part of a divine system designed to ensure that God's presence remained among the people of Israel. It was a place where the holy and the earthly were intertwined, a space that operated not just on the physical plane, but in the realm of the divine, inviting all who entered to be transformed by its power. As the day unfolded, each sound, each action, each prayer was a part of a greater divine symphony, a reflection of the glory and splendor of Solomon's temple, where God himself was worshipped, and his people, through their devotion, found themselves drawn ever closer to the divine. But behind this sacred order, there were secrets, mysteries within mysteries, that only the most initiated would ever fully comprehend. What rituals, what supernatural forces were at play in this most sacred of places? What was the true cost of such power? The answers hidden beneath layers of sanctity and divine power would only be revealed to those who dared to look deeper. In this video, you'll uncover the hidden truth about Solomon's mastery over supernatural forces, using the power of a magical ring that gave him dominion over beings beyond this world. You'll also delve into the forbidden rituals within his palace, the seductive practices that turned the harem into not just a place of pleasure, but a nexus of political power that would shift the course of history forever. What you are about to hear about the greatest monarch of antiquity, King Solomon, will unveil secrets that few have dared to speak of, a tale woven with power, desire, and consequences that continue to echo through the ages. Picture a palace so vast it could comfortably house 1,000 women, each with her own quarters, her own servants, and most importantly, her own rituals. This was no mere collection of royal wives. It was a grand design of power and diplomacy. Solomon's harem was far more than a den of luxury and indulgence. It was a center of political maneuvering, where alliances were formed, treaties were forged, and the fate of entire nations was decided. Among these women, Solomon's royal wives and his 300 concubines served not only as his companions, but as strategic partners, each representing a connection to distant kingdoms. These were alliances formed not from love, but from the very pulse of politics and empire. At the pinnacle of this complex harem hierarchy sat the daughter of Pharaoh, whose position was the most prestigious of them all. Her palace, an exquisite structure of its own, stood apart, lavishly adorned with Egyptian hieroglyphs and furnished with treasures from the Nile. Her entourage consisted of hundreds of servants, dancers, and musicians from Egypt, all dedicated to maintaining the grandeur of her position. Her garments, crafted from linen so fine it was said to be as transparent as water, signified not only her royal status, but also her unique and unassailable power. As you explore this harem, you'll discover the influence of the other women from distant lands, the princesses of Moab, known for their exotic fragrances and a deep understanding of aromatics. The women of Sidon, skilled in weaving royal purple, a color reserved for the wealthiest and most powerful. This was a place where culture, tradition, and beauty from all corners of the ancient world converged. Solomon's harem became a living testament to the unity and diversity of his reign, blending the finest traditions and creations from the furthest reaches of his empire. It was not simply a luxury retreat, but a miniature kingdom in its own right, with its own intricate hierarchy and protocol. The royal wives resided in the upper levels of the harem, luxurious pavilions overlooking perfumed gardens, living lives of opulence and grandeur. Below them, the concubines, though well taken care of, lived in more modest quarters. Even here, in the lower levels, comfort was ensured. Solomon spared no expense when it came to the welfare of his women. Each of the women in the harem held a royal seal, an emblem of power that allowed them to engage in business, maintain correspondence with their homelands, and uphold the alliances of their respective kingdoms. Scribes, appointed to meticulously record the names, lineages, dowries, gifts exchanged, and most importantly, the children born from these unions, ensured that nothing went unnoticed in the grand scheme of Solomon's political and dynastic efforts. The administration of the harem was a system so intricate it could rival the workings of an empire. A veritable army of stewards, guards, cooks, musicians, doctors, and midwives supported the daily life of the harem. Everything was done with a precision that reflected the king's exacting standards, the rules strictly followed to maintain order. The routine of life was coordinated by messengers, usually elderly women of great respect, who were trusted to manage communication and relations between the various sectors of the harem. But even within this well-ordered system, Solomon knew that power could be fleeting. To prevent alliances from forming behind his back, no wife could visit another without prior permission. This rule was not merely about maintaining harmony, it was a measure to prevent conspiracies, to keep the potential for dangerous alliances at bay, and to ensure that every decision made in the harem worked in Solomon's favor. Such was the complexity and intrigue of Solomon's world. Nothing was left to chance. What you are about to uncover in this story unveils the most intimate secrets of Solomon's palace, a place where beauty, power, and desire dance together in an eternal celebration. Every night within those walls was a unique and sacred ritual, a constant exchange of love, loyalty, and ambition. Solomon's harem was far more than a place of sensual pleasure. It was the pulse of his kingdom, the center from which the strings of fate were pulled, and a testament to the king's ability to balance wisdom with the complexities of human nature. The rituals for a night with the king began with the first light of dawn. The chosen woman, her identity shrouded in secrecy, was announced in whispers by a messenger. This marked the start of a day-long process, an elaborate ceremony that was both an art and a sacred tradition, one that few would ever witness in its entirety. She was first escorted to the House of Purifications, a building reserved exclusively for this sacred beautification ritual. This space was not merely a chamber, it was a temple in itself, dedicated to preparing the woman for her night with the king. Inside, she would bathe in 7 different pools, each filled with water infused with specific aromatic oils: myrrh, aloe, cassia, and cinnamon, scents that had been passed down through generations of harem guardians. These oils were chosen for their power to cleanse and purify, to prepare both body and spirit for the king's presence. 7 personal handmaidens, each with a task as intricate as the next, attended to her every need. Their delicate hands washed her hair with rare essences, styling it with ivory combs inlaid with precious stones. Her skin was treated with a luxurious blend of honey, goat's milk, and secret oils, a recipe so ancient and sacred it was kept hidden within the inner circles of the palace, protected by centuries of tradition. It was said that those who bathed in these oils would emerge not just physically transformed, but spiritually imbued with an almost divine aura. Her nails, carefully manicured, were painted with henna in intricate symbolic designs. Each design told a story of love, written in an ancient script known only to those who belonged to the palace. These symbols were not merely for beauty, they were a language of seduction, telling tales of desire and devotion that echoed through the corridors of time. The garments chosen for the night were selected with equal care, fabrics so fine they appeared to have been spun by the hands of gods, dyed with pigments extracted from shells and precious minerals. These were no ordinary clothes. They were works of art, crafted to evoke both beauty and power. Each garment held meaning, designed to symbolize the woman's status and allure in the eyes of the king. Jewelry, too, played its part. More than just adornments, each piece was imbued with symbolic meaning, representing both her beauty and the seductive power she wielded. Necklaces, bracelets, and rings, each studded with gems that captured the light in such a way that they seemed to glow with their own inner fire, were carefully placed upon her. As the woman was prepared, the royal chamber was also set with equal precision. Golden censers, filled with aromatic incense, spread a captivating fragrance throughout the room, its sweet and intoxicating scent filling the air. Flower petals, picked fresh from the palace gardens, were scattered across silk sheets, creating a scene of beauty that was both tranquil and sensual. Small oil lamps, carefully arranged, cast a soft, flickering glow, their light dancing like whispers in the dark, setting the perfect mood for what was to come. In adjoining rooms, musicians, specially trained in the art of love songs, positioned themselves discreetly, ready to play. Their harps and flutes filled the air with gentle melodies, each note inspired by the Song of Songs, the ancient text that was as sweet as honey and filled with the promise of romance and mystery. These songs, sacred and sensual, served to elevate the moment, enhancing the intimacy of the night. Before the woman was allowed to enter the king's presence, she was instructed in the arts of love by experienced elders, wise women who had spent their lives passing down secrets that had been carefully guarded for generations. Every gesture, every word, every movement was rehearsed and perfected, ensuring that the night would be unforgettable, a night where beauty and power intertwined with ancient wisdom. But what you're about to learn goes far deeper than the rituals of beauty and love. Solomon, the wisest king to ever reign, wielded more than just power over his harem. He had a dominion over forces unseen, supernatural powers that allowed him to command demons, bend the elements, and protect his kingdom from spiritual threats. You will discover the secret rituals practiced not only by his wives, but by Solomon himself in the hidden chambers of the palace. The mysteries of his court went far beyond what the people could see, far beyond the glittering gold and sacred rituals. What happened in the deepest corners of Solomon's palace was a world of its own, where forbidden practices and mystical forces worked together to shape the destiny of a kingdom. Get ready for revelations that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the wisest monarch in history. The Song of Songs echoed through the corridors of Solomon's palace, its verses so rich in passion and divine love that it was elevated to the level of Holy Scripture. In these sacred lines, Solomon revealed a profound vision of love, one that transcended mere physicality intertwining the human with the divine. The love he described was not just a reflection of the heart's desires, but a mirror of the divine affection, where earthly passion became a sacred expression of God's love for his people. The women who filled Solomon's harem were not mere companions. They were emissaries of their distant lands, each bringing with her the deep sensual traditions of her culture. The Egyptian women, with their sinuous movements and allure, had mastered the art of belly dancing. They moved as if they were one with the earth, their bodies undulating like serpents, their dance an intoxicating ritual that could stir even the most composed of souls. The golden cymbals they played provided a backdrop for their movements, the sound as haunting and mesmerizing as the dance itself. The Phoenician women were the alchemists of scent. Perfume was their magic. With skill and precision, they crafted intoxicating oils and fragrances that could enchant the senses, captivating anyone who breathed them in. Their perfumes were not just smells, but gateways to another world, filled with mystery, beauty, and deep longing. They could weave spells with a mere drop of their fragrant concoctions, making the air itself thick with desire. The Moabite women, on the other hand, were the heart of the harem's music. Their love songs, soft yet powerful, carried a melody so pure it could melt the hardest of hearts. Each note was a prayer, each word an offering of devotion. When they sang, time seemed to stand still, and all who heard them were drawn into the powerful pull of their melodies, their voices a reminder of love's sweetest and most tender expressions. At the very heart of the palace, secret gardens flourished under the shade of pomegranate trees and vineyards, paths winding through them with murmuring fountains as their soundtrack. It was here, amid this paradise, that the women would gather, not as rivals, but as a sisterhood, sharing their wisdom and secrets. They taught one another ancient recipes made from aromatic herbs, passed down through generations, that had the power to heal, to seduce, and to transform. Dance, too, was a part of their education, with movements so hypnotic they could entrance anyone who watched. And of course, they shared the subtler arts, the seductive charm of conversation, where every word and glance held the potential to sway hearts and minds. Each woman brought her own vision of beauty and pleasure, and in this harem, the blending of cultures created a vibrant tapestry of sensuality and grace. The bonds between the women were as complex as the court they inhabited, where each sought to master the art of love and beauty in her own way while learning from the others. Special musical instruments, crafted specifically for the rituals of love, were reserved for the most intimate moments. Delicate harps, their strings woven from silk threads, produced sounds that whispered like soft caresses. Drums, their rhythms deep and resonant, echoed through the night like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Flutes, with notes that rose like passionate sighs, played melodies that seemed to speak directly to the soul. Music was not merely entertainment in Solomon's palace. It was a form of magic, a key that unlocked the deepest chambers of the heart, a tool that could summon emotions both sweet and powerful. But even as beauty and harmony filled the air, there was an undercurrent of rivalry, one that was fierce, silent, and ever-present. Solomon, the wisest of kings, was the object of intense competition among the women of his harem. It was no ordinary competition. It was a battle for more than affection. It was a game of power, desire, and influence. Every gesture, every smile, every glance was loaded with meaning. What you're about to discover within Solomon's harem reveals a world of intrigue, where the rivalry for the king's attention was not just about love. It was about shaping the fate of nations, influencing the king's decisions, and securing a place in the history of Israel. The women of the harem played a silent yet powerful game. They knew that the favor of Solomon was not just about beauty or grace. It was about influence, intelligence, and the ability to manipulate the delicate web of politics and desire. What seemed like a peaceful harem was, in truth, a complex and dangerous battleground, where the stakes were nothing less than the future of the kingdom itself. Within the vast and opulent harem of Solomon, each woman knew that the king's favor was the key to her power, and she would stop at nothing to win it. But capturing Solomon's gaze was no simple task. Some women relied on their intellect, joining private discussions on matters of politics, philosophy, and governance, subtly impressing the king with their sharp minds and ability to understand the complexities of his reign. These women knew that true influence came not only from beauty, but also from the power of wisdom. They skillfully participated in conversations, offering solutions to problems Solomon faced, and in doing so, they gained a place in the king's confidence. Others took a different route. They nurtured their artistic talents, composing poetry that would touch the king's heart, crafting exotic fragrances that captured his senses, or perfecting dances that moved with such grace that they seemed almost otherworldly. These performances were more than just entertainment. They were a form of communication. Each gesture, each movement, each note in the music, laced with a message of longing and devotion. Solomon, known for his wisdom, understood that the language of art was as powerful as the spoken word. Yet, beneath this air of grace and beauty, the competition was fierce and quiet. It was a ruthless game, one where alliances were forged in the shadows. Women from different nations, each bringing their own culture, traditions, and powers, would unite in secret, weaving networks of influence that extended far beyond the walls of the palace. A cunning concubine could rise in status quickly, gaining favor by aligning herself with the more powerful royal wives who had access to the king's inner circle. These alliances were delicate and fragile, built on mutual trust, ambition, and the ever-present hope that the king's favor would one day be theirs. Even the servants, often seen as mere attendants, played pivotal roles in this game of power. They were the silent watchers, the ones who moved unnoticed through the corridors, carrying secret messages between the women, observing the king's actions and reporting back to their mistresses. A carefully timed whisper, a well-placed compliment, or a casual remark could change the course of a woman's destiny in the harem. The servants were the eyes and ears of the palace, and their loyalty was just as crucial as that of the women they served. Gifts exchanged between the women and the king, or between the women themselves, carried hidden meanings, subtle messages that spoke of power, affection, or desire. A cup of spiced wine offered at the right moment could be a signal of allegiance or a silent act of seduction. A poem inscribed on scented papyrus could convey feelings of love or rivalry, while a jewel marked with mysterious symbols could represent a promise or a threat. These gifts were not just tokens, they were pieces of a secret language, one that only those truly embedded in the harem's world could understand. The wisest women of the harem knew that beauty alone could not secure Solomon's heart or his power. They understood that to truly influence the king, they had to master more than just their appearance. They studied him. They watched his every move, learned his likes and dislikes, understood the challenges he faced in governing the kingdom, and became attuned to his moods and habits. Some women even became informal advisors to the king, offering counsel during the quiet moments of intimacy when Solomon's guard was down. These women shaped decisions, influencing the course of events not with loud proclamations, but with soft words whispered at the right time. But this quiet manipulation came at a cost. As the women vied for power, the kingdom itself began to change. Solomon's children, born of these alliances, would carry the consequences of this delicate balance of love and power. It was in these very children that the seeds of the kingdom's decline were sown. As Solomon aged, the careful web of influence and desire that had kept his reign steady began to unravel. The story of Solomon's heirs is a story of ambition, betrayal, and a kingdom on the brink of collapse. The events that followed would alter the course of sacred history, leaving a legacy that would echo through the ages. What you're about to discover about Solomon's children marks the beginning of the end for the greatest kingdom Israel had ever known. A kingdom shaped by love, power, and far-reaching consequences. These were the events that would ultimately lead to the kingdom's fracture, changing the very destiny of the people of Israel forever. Despite the grandeur of Solomon's harem, which boasted 1,000 women, the Bible records the birth of only one legitimate son, Rehoboam, born to Naamah the Ammonite. But scholars believe that the reality was far more complex, with dozens of princes and princesses born within the royal harem. Each birth was not just a personal or familial event, it was a calculated political move, an act that sealed alliances with distant kingdoms and ensured the creation of multiple lines of succession within the palace. These children were not only heirs to Solomon's throne, but to the kingdoms and peoples their mothers represented. Each royal child grew up in a world entirely their own, an isolated universe where their every need and desire was catered to, but also where the weight of their royal lineage shaped every moment of their lives. The education of these children was a matter of great importance, one that went beyond just learning the customs of Israel. Tutors from all over the world were brought in, each chosen for their expertise in a specific field. These tutors taught foreign languages, philosophy, and the arts, ensuring that the royal children would be equipped to navigate the complexities of ruling not just over Israel, but over an empire that spanned many cultures. The competition among the mothers was fierce. Each one knew that the education of her child could make or break their future. Mothers vied for the best tutors, knowing that knowledge was power, and with power came influence. The Hebrew teachers, those who adhered to the ancient ways, worked tirelessly to instill in the royal children the law of Moses, ensuring that the traditions of Israel were preserved within the palace. Meanwhile, foreign masters introduced their own culture's myths and philosophies, lessons drawn from the lands of Egypt, Phoenicia, Moab, and beyond. The palace became a melting pot of ideas and traditions, a place where cultures collided, blending the ancient laws of Israel with the exotic wisdom of distant lands. Rehoboam, Solomon's only legitimate heir, grew up torn between these two worlds. Raised in the traditions of Israel, with the Hebrew faith and laws as the foundation of his upbringing, he was simultaneously surrounded by the exotic cultures of his foreign aunts, stepmothers, and half-siblings. His life was one of contrasts, between the devout teachings of the Hebrew teachers and the enchanting, often seductive influences of his foreign lineage. These contrasts would later come to define his reign, with the duality of his upbringing pulling him in opposing directions. It would be this struggle that would eventually lead to the tragic downfall of his kingdom. The figure of the father, Solomon, remained distant throughout much of Rehoboam's childhood. Solomon, burdened by the weight of statecraft and the complexities of managing a harem filled with 1,000 women, was rarely present in the lives of his children. He delegated the responsibility of their upbringing to the mothers and their chosen tutors, leaving the children to be molded according to the desires and ambitions of their mothers. Each mother sought to raise her child in her own image, imbuing them with the values of their own culture, creating divisions and rivalries that were often veiled in silence, but no less potent. These silent factions within the palace would ripple through the royal household, creating an atmosphere of intrigue and competition, as each mother hoped to secure a future for her child on the throne. Solomon's reign, built upon wisdom and vast power, was not without its shadows. The complex dynamics within the royal household, filled with multiple lines of succession, divisions of loyalty, and competing factions, would sow the seeds of division that would ultimately unravel the kingdom. Rehoboam, caught between these conflicting worlds, was left with a fractured sense of identity. The future king of Israel was destined to inherit not just a kingdom, but a tangled web of political, familial, and cultural legacies that would shape his reign in ways no one could have foreseen. As time passed, Solomon's harem transformed into more than just a center of political and sensual power. It became a spiritual battlefield. With each foreign wife came not only beauty, influence, and diplomatic alliances, but also the gods of distant lands. The daughter of Pharaoh, with her grace and Egyptian heritage, worshipped Isis and Osiris in private chambers adorned with intricate hieroglyphs, creating a space where Egyptian deities were honored in sacred rituals. The Sidonian women, with their own customs and traditions, burned incense to Astarte, their sacred goddess of love and war, in hidden corners of the palace. The Moabite wives, under the shroud of moonlight, celebrated secret rituals dedicated to Chemosh, their god of war and sacrifice. At first, Solomon regarded these foreign cults with the tolerance of a diplomat, viewing them as necessary gestures to maintain peace and alliances. His wisdom, vast as it was, led him to see these practices as part of the delicate political fabric he had woven through marriage and diplomacy. But as time wore on, a different temptation arose. Solomon, a man of deep intellect and boundless curiosity, found himself increasingly drawn into these foreign rituals, seduced not just by the love he had for his wives, but by the allure of the mysteries they offered. What began as passive observation soon became active participation. He built altars to these foreign gods on the hills surrounding Jerusalem, each one more extravagant than the last, as if to challenge the very sovereignty of the God of Israel. The impact of Solomon's actions was devastating, not just spiritually but politically. As their king, Solomon set an example that the people could not ignore. When the people saw their wise and revered ruler participating in these pagan practices, they too began to stray from their ancestral faith. The faithful, the prophets and the priests cried out against this infidelity, warning of the consequences of abandoning the one true God. Yet their voices were drowned out by the sounds of pagan drums and the raucous laughter echoing from the harem. The call to worship Yahweh seemed distant, even irrelevant, as the seductive pull of foreign gods filled the air. At the heart of Israel's kingdom, an invisible war was being waged, a war between the loyalty to the God of Israel and the seductive allure of foreign religions. Even as the magnificent temple of Yahweh stood in solemn glory at the center of Jerusalem, a rival spiritual world began to rise in the shadows. Small pagan shrines erected to honor the gods of Solomon's wives sprouted like weeds in the royal palace gardens. Where once the sacred aroma of incense from the temple had filled the air, it now mingled with the profane scents of the secret rituals performed behind closed doors. The spiritual unity of the kingdom was unraveling, torn between the worship of Yahweh and the enticement of foreign deities. Yet this spiritual crisis was only one facet of the growing troubles Solomon faced. The cost of maintaining such a lavish court, with its 1,000 wives and their lavish lifestyles, was not merely an emotional or diplomatic strain. It was a monumental economic burden. Each wife required a standard of living befitting her royal status, a retinue of servants, lavish clothing, exquisite jewelry, and exotic foods from distant lands. The once proud royal treasury, filled with the wealth from trade and tribute, began to shrink. What had once been a kingdom overflowing with riches now found its coffers steadily dwindling. To maintain the court's opulence and support the growing demands of his harem, Solomon resorted to raising taxes and imposing forced labor upon his people. The once thriving kingdom, which had been a beacon of prosperity, now found its citizens murmuring in discontent. The golden prosperity that had shone so brightly under Solomon's reign was now overshadowed by the weight of oppression. The people, once proud of their wise and glorious king, began to see his reign differently. They no longer viewed him as the wise ruler who had brought peace and prosperity, but as a king whose insatiable desire for grandeur had led the kingdom into spiritual and financial ruin. The wisdom that had once defined Solomon's reign, bringing him fame and admiration across the ancient world, now seemed to falter under the weight of his choices. The harem, a symbol of Solomon's wealth and influence, had become the very thing that began to unravel the kingdom. What began in wisdom and glory was quietly heading toward ruin. Solomon's once unquestionable authority was being eroded by the very power he had sought to wield. The seeds of division, both spiritual and economic, had been planted, and the consequences of Solomon's indulgence were now taking root in the kingdom he had so carefully built. As King Solomon grew older, the intrigues within his harem began to intensify, swirling like a storm through the golden columns and perfumed halls of the palace. The younger wives, eager to secure their place in his affections, fiercely competed for his attention, each one hoping to rise in status and influence. Meanwhile, the older wives, those who had once held his favor, fought desperately to maintain their power, fearing that their positions were slipping away. Their struggles were not just personal, they were political, as the balance of power in the palace could shape the future of the kingdom itself. Rumors of conspiracies, silent whispers of betrayal, circulated through the palace like smoke, threatening to ignite the fragile peace that Solomon had carefully constructed over the years. Amidst these earthly tensions, the legend of Solomon's mystical powers grew. Ancient texts speak of the legendary Ring of Solomon, a mystical artifact that was engraved with the sacred name of God. This ring, so potent and mysterious, was said to grant its wearer dominion over the spirits and demons of the unseen world. According to the old traditions, Solomon did not use this power for selfish gain or personal indulgence. Rather, he invoked these forces to accomplish monumental feats, works that would define his reign for centuries to come. The construction of the temple, the palace, and the city of Jerusalem itself, each of these marvels, crafted from colossal stones and cedars from the distant forests of Lebanon, was believed to have been moved by supernatural forces summoned under the king's command. Every intricate detail of his kingdom was said to have been touched by this divine power, making Solomon not just a king, but a ruler who bridged the gap between heaven and earth. But the power attributed to Solomon went beyond the material realm. Legends claim that demons themselves were bound to serve him, some as messengers, able to travel vast distances in the blink of an eye, others tasked with revealing the hidden secrets of the universe. These spirits shared their knowledge with the king, teaching him the healing properties of plants, metals, and precious stones, secrets that allowed Solomon to become a master of alchemy and medicine. The ancient texts spoke of the king's ability to see beyond the surface of things, unlocking the mysteries of creation itself. The knowledge Solomon amassed through his command of these supernatural forces was so profound that it would later be sought after by magicians, sages, and scholars for generations to come. These ancient texts, known as the Testament of Solomon, described how the king would interrogate the spirits, demanding their names, their functions, and their weaknesses. The sacred wisdom contained in these texts was said to be encoded in a series of mystical symbols and words, sought after by those who desired the same power that Solomon wielded. Yet, even with all this supernatural authority at his disposal, Solomon remained deeply reverent before God. Despite his ability to command the invisible forces, he knew that his power was not his own. It came from the Most High, the Creator of heaven and earth, who had granted him the wisdom and authority to rule. Solomon understood that his dominion over spirits and demons was a divine gift, a responsibility bestowed upon him for the good of his people. He used his power not to exalt himself or to seek personal glory, but to fulfill his divine mission, to build the temple of God and to honor the Creator who had given him the strength to achieve greatness. In the face of all this power and knowledge, Solomon's heart remained humble. He recognized that his wisdom, his authority, and even his mastery over the unseen world were but instruments in the hands of a greater force. His reverence for God never wavered, and he remained committed to using his gifts for the glory of the Creator, aware that his reign, as glorious as it was only temporary, a part of the divine plan that stretched beyond his own life. In the end, the reign of King Solomon was a tale of profound wisdom, unparalleled achievement, and tragic downfall. His power was unmatched, not only as a ruler over a vast empire, but as a master of the unseen forces that shaped the world. Through his legendary ring, Solomon commanded spirits and demons, drawing on their knowledge to build a kingdom that stood as a testament to both divine favor and human ambition. His temple, a magnificent symbol of Israel's devotion to God, was the crown jewel of his reign, a reflection of his wisdom and the divine blessings that accompanied him. Yet, despite his spiritual and mystical prowess, Solomon's heart was not immune to the allure of foreign influences. His harem, once a political tool, became a battleground for power, desire, and ultimately, spiritual betrayal. His participation in the rituals of foreign gods, a practice that began as a diplomatic gesture, became a dangerous drift away from the worship of the God of Israel. As his influence waned, so too did the kingdom's unity, as the people followed their king's example and strayed from their ancestral faith. Solomon's children, born of these diverse alliances, inherited not just his kingdom, but the divisions and complexities of his reign. Rehoboam, his son, would inherit a kingdom divided, fractured by the very forces of power, love, and desire that Solomon had once wielded so skillfully. The seeds of division had been sown, and the future of Israel would never be the same. The wisdom that had elevated Solomon to greatness was the same wisdom that, in his later years, led to his downfall. The delicate balance between spiritual devotion and worldly power, between wisdom and indulgence, proved to be more fragile than even Solomon could have foreseen. The glory of his reign, so grand and awe-inspiring in its height, began to crumble beneath the weight of its excesses. And yet, despite the decline, Solomon's legacy endured. His name, his wisdom, and the tales of his reign would live on in history, in sacred texts, and in the hearts of those who sought to understand the complexities of faith, power, and the human condition. His story serves as a reminder that even the greatest of kings must walk carefully between the realms of divine wisdom and human frailty. For in the end, it is not the grandeur of a king's reign that defines his legacy, but the choices he makes and the lessons those choices leave behind. The story of King Solomon serves as a powerful reminder of the greatness and fragility of power, love, and wisdom. Though Solomon achieved monumental feats and built a mighty kingdom, it was also through the very powers he wielded, along with his missteps, that the kingdom he worked so hard to create began to crumble. Solomon's life teaches us profound lessons about the balance between divine wisdom and human frailty. His story is not only one of great accomplishments, but also a cautionary tale of how even the most powerful rulers must remain vigilant and humble in their choices. The lesson from Solomon's journey is clear. Wisdom alone is not enough. It must be accompanied by humility, faithfulness, and a commitment to the greater good. The allure of power, luxury, and indulgence can easily lead us astray, no matter how wise we may be. Let Solomon's story inspire us to stay grounded in our faith, to make wise choices, and to remember that our actions today shape the legacy we leave behind. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the life of Solomon. I truly appreciate your time, attention, and the opportunity to share these timeless lessons with you. If you've been inspired by Solomon's story and the lessons it offers, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. How can you use wisdom, faith, and humility to shape a future full of greatness and purpose. If this message resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others who might find inspiration here. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let's spread these lessons far and wide. And if you feel moved, consider supporting this channel through Super Thanks. Your generosity helps keep this light shining. May you be blessed with wisdom and understanding, and may your heart always seek truth and goodness. May your journey be filled with purpose, your steps guided by faith, and your life touched by the divine wisdom that Solomon sought and shared. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next message.